Now we pray with me. God of ages past and all time to come, show us the way you have planned for us. Plant our feet in the footprints of those who come before. May your truth be in all that happens here today. Amen. It feels as if this Sunday has been a long time coming, particularly for those of us who have monitored daily the ongoing transformation of the property that we will consecrate later today. And yet, as time goes, it's not really that long at all. Today is one of those Sundays where church just seems to come together. We celebrate All Saints' Day on this, the Sunday after the official feast day, and we honor all that we are and will become in this special church, this special day. We celebrate all that has come before, all who have come before, all who make it possible for us to be in this place. We honor the saints in our lives, the founders of MCC churches all over the world, and those individuals in all times and places in our private and communal lives who have taught us what it is to be a child of God. So it makes sense that we would talk about grace, because in the end it is all about God's wonderful, matchless grace in our lives. In the lives of those who have gone before it, and the hopes and dreams of those still to come, that grace still shines. And so here we are on Consecration Sunday, one giant day of consecration and commitment. We've spent the last month looking at various aspects of giving, and many of us may now look at giving a little bit differently. Today is no different, and so I start with a story. Many of you will remember the story several years ago about the Women's College Softball Regional Tournament. Anyway, there was a Women's College Regional Tournament, and it appeared that the winners were obvious before the game even started. I know you've all been to those games or unfortunately been on one of those teams. The team that was going to lose, not the team that was going to win. Then something very strange happened. One young woman on the team who was not supposed to win and who had never hit a home run in her life knocked it over the fence. It was a grand slam. The bases were loaded, or so they thought. But this woman was suddenly and inexplicably hurt and fell to the ground at first base. Later, she learned it was a torn ACL. At that point, all that was clear was that she was not going to be able to run around those bases. Now, it appears that the rules of softball are much more complicated than I thought they were. But her team knew that they could neither touch nor help her if the run was going to count. So a strange thing happened. A young woman on the opposing team who had hit more home runs than all the rest of those young women on the field motioned to one of her teammates, and they walked over to the hurt player on the opposing team and picked her up and walked her and carried her to every single base, making sure that she touched her good toe to the base so that it would count. It lost them the game, but it made them the women their parents, coaches, and friends could be proud of. The story was all over YouTube, and both of the young women who sacrificed their own needs to help this injured player simply said, she hit a home run. She deserved to see it count. To this day, I cannot watch the video of these women helping an injured stranger across home plate without tearing up. If you go to their story on YouTube, you will find that the number of hits on the various postings of this story is absolutely phenomenal. It went viral within the first couple of days that it was out. And to this, Jesus, I believe, would say, Amen. Do you get it? Jesus starts our gospel lesson this morning with perhaps one of the most famous of all parables. Our contemporary interpretation changes for some reason the species of tree, but you recognize it, I'm sure, nevertheless. One little seed, be it pine nut or mustard seed, grows into a tree large enough for birds to build their nest in. One tiny seed. Now, one day this week when I arrived at the campus, I found Joe, who's our general contractor, planting grass seed in the place where the little house had stood before we tore it down. Not because we paid him to, but because he wanted to contribute to the beauty for years to come. I told him he was doing a great job, and he responded that he was planting seed for the future. I told him that the sermon would reflect the same story, and he was very excited to think that he would be a part of the sermon. It's been interesting to talk to Joe all along the way about what makes this church, well, this church. We are, each of us, quite small seeds, but when watered by God's grace and formed by God's unconditional love and acceptance for each of us, a great ministry will continue to grow. Paul reminds us and the Christians at Rome that all of our gifts are different, but are all manifested through the same blessing of grace. The grace of being gifted by God. Amen. Do you get it? This day has come with great sacrifice on the part of some and the prayers and time and talent of many. It's a day when we rejoice. It is also a day that should give us pause. For almost 3 years, the phrase, when we have space of our own, has pervaded every conversation that we have had about our future ministries and our call to live out God's justice in the world. My friends, today, we have our own space. Amen. And do we get it? Do we get that with the blessing of God's grace comes the call to divine responsibility? Why divine responsibility? Because God has both planted and watered the seed, and we are all set to harvest it. Amen. And do we get it? Do we get that Jesus is calling us to greatness? A greatness that can only be called forth through the sacred grace of our Creator's love. Do we get that Jesus is calling us to greatness because the world, our world, needs greatness today more than anything else? The world needs those of us who are willing to stand up and be great. To do not just the next right thing, but the great thing. To bring the glorious good news that our Creator loves us, each and every one of us, just as we are divinely created, all as sacred children of God, created to bless and to be a blessing to others. Amen. And do we get it? And so we turn to the second short little parable for today. It's about